Good evening, everybody, and welcome to East Devon District Council's Cabinet meeting for this, the 5th of March 2025. I'm your Chair, Councillor Paul Arnott. Welcome anybody watching the meeting via live streaming. We'll now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present, and we will also be requesting any declarations of interest at this point. Amanda, please.
Thank you, Chair. Starting with yourself, and if you have any declarations, please.
Present, no declarations of interest, thank you.
Councillor Hayward.
Present, two declarations, both of them affects NRI, one in relation to agenda item 13 and one in relation to agenda item 16. Both relate to my employment as with a local authority, Astminster Town Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
Present and an ORI in relation to agenda item 24 as a member of Cranbrook Town Council.
Thank you. Councillor Hookway.
Present and declarations on agenda item 21 and 22, member of Exmouth Town Council.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Present. Two declarations, one on 13 and one on 16, the nature of which I don't have to disclose under section 32 of the Local Government Act, affects NRI.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
I'm here, no declarations.
Councillor Ledger. Councillor Olive.
Present and no declarations, thank you.
Present, no declarations.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Amanda. Agenda item 1, the minutes of two previous meetings from the 5th of February and the 17th of February 2025. If anybody has a comment on these, please could you raise your hand? If no hands are raised, I'll take it as an indication that you agree to the minutes of those previous meetings. Thank you very much. The previous meetings are recommended to be agreed. And we'll pass that down. Thank you very much. Agenda item 2, Amanda, apologies, please.
Yes, I have one cabinet apology, and that's Councillor Loudon as well as Councillor Ledger. Yep. Okay. And one officer apology, and that's Simon Davey.
Thank you. I've also, Councillor Beth Collins and Paula Fernley have asked for their apology to be recorded as well. Thank you very much. Agenda item 3 is declarations of interest, so we've already done that. Agenda item 4.
Sorry, Chair.
On
that, are there any other councillors present?
Oh, yes. Any other councillors wish to make? Yes, Councillor Gazard, please. Interested.
Good evening, Chair and everybody. Yeah, can I declare an effects NRI on items 21 and 22? I'm an Exmouth Town Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gazard, very much. Anybody else? Yes, Councillor Brian Bailey and Aurora Bailey.
Same as Councillor Gallagher.
Okay. And the same
The
for
same,
Aurora,
yeah.
too.
Thank
Thank
you,
you very much, both of you. Councillor Kevin Blakey, please.
Thank you, Chair. I want to declare an interest in item 24. I was minded to declare an effects NRI on this one, but in view of the declaration made by Councillor Hawkins, I'm now a little confused and could do with some guidance. An ORI is going to mean that as a ward member, I'm not going to be able to speak during the debate, which seems a little perverse. Can I have some guidance, please, as to what I should be declaring here as a member of Cranbrook Town Council?
Thanks, Anita.
Certainly, Councillor. As ever, it is a matter for your own judgment. In my view, the Cranbrook matter does directly relate to the finances and well-being of one of your ORIs, so Cranbrook Town Council. So that would be my advice, because it is a project that maybe it's a discussion for the Part B section of the meeting, isn't it? But there is a financial implication for Cranbrook in it. So that would be my view. As ever, it is for you to make your own decision.
Well, I would clearly be very foolish to go against officer advice. So I must reluctantly declare an ORI on that one.
Yes, yes, go on. Thank you.
And clearly I'll have to declare the same. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Let's talk about this again when we get into Part B, can we, as well? I can see the balance, absolutely, but also slightly worried.
Easier discussed later.
Yes, absolutely. Let's do that. Okay, thanks, Kim. Right, okay, we now go to agenda item. This is always where I turn over all my bits of paper, and there it is, 4, which is public speaking. I haven't got anybody listed for public speaking. There's no member of the public here. Councillor Goodman?
If the 15 minutes is not being used up, I have 2 questions I would like to ask Cabinet.
Which agenda items do they relate
No,
to?
they do not apply to agenda item. Under our constitution, rule 8, I'm allowed, if you don't use the 15 minutes up, I can ask 2 questions, I can ask questions of Cabinet. And I'm already checked this out today with Democratic Services, and I want to ask questions of Cabinet.
I think you've told Democratic Services what you're going to do. It's a discourtesy, but please press ahead.
One thing I'm not is discourteous, and I want to have you tell me that. I have 2 very simple questions. One, when will the public be given the information on the important stock condition survey, which was shared with councillors in November, and we were told we would be getting that, the public would be seeing that once the details were confirmed. The second question is about a question that Councillor Brian Bailey asked in Council last week, and that was about the provision of leisure facilities. In particular, his supplementary question that he asked, which was that football and rugby pitches for adults is increased by 50%. This was discussed at overview and scrutiny, and we asked the officer to go away and review this. The review produced did not change the 50% increase to adult playing in rugby and football, and I would like to understand why. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Goodman. It would have been helpful, perhaps during your leave, to have submitted those questions in writing, and we could have had them for you tonight. So if you can submit them in writing, I think officers have noted those and will give you written replies. Thank you very much.
Well, I will come
Sorry,
in. No,
what?
I will come in. I've asked that question both of Dan Ledger and the
Well, hold on,
portfolio
can you
before,
sit down,
and
please?
still
Can you
have
sit
not
down?
had the answer.
No, if you just go through normal,
I have. That's my point.
If any member just goes through the normal, calm, courteous processes, then asks by correspondence in advance, or perhaps notifies me in advance as chair that that member would like an answer to that question, it does make things a bit easier. Right, we now go on to agenda item. Sorry, Councillor Bowler, you're not listed to speak at
Yeah,
this item.
again, Chair, I would like to say that the Constitution does clearly state that if the 15 minutes aren't taken, any councillor can ask any member of the Cabinet or any portfolio holder any question.
Yes, of course, that's correct. Who said they couldn't?
But you're saying it's discourteous, but that is part of the rules, isn't it? Sorry, if it
No,
isn't.
the normal courtesy in the council, I wouldn't dream of going a period before council given its scrutiny in any case, but certainly give a heads up so that officers and members have a time to give answers in this forum. That's what's most helpful, but thank you for your contribution,
But I thought the whole point of the...
That's said, Councillor, okay? Councillor Jackson, please.
I just wondered whether we could ask our Democratic Services officers just to give us clarification on that particular constitutional point.
I don't think we need to, Sarah, at this stage. I think the questions have been put. It would have been nice to have had them before. We could have answered them here, but written answers will be given. Okay, right, so we now go to agenda item 5, which is matters of urgency. And there are 2 late items which officers recommend should be dealt with in the way listed at agenda items 11, which are the overview minutes for the 20th of February 2025, and agenda item 24, the Cranbox modular space delivery in Cranbrook Town Centre. Agenda item 6, confidential exempt items. There are 4 items to be dealt with in this way at agenda items 21 and 24. And now we go to minutes. Agenda item 7, minutes of the Strata Joint Executive Committee held on the 28th of January 2025. Do members wish to make any particular recommendations, or can we agree to move this forward without specific recommendations? Thank you very much. We move those forward. Agenda item 8, the minutes of the Recycling and Waste Partnership Board held on the 29th of January 2025. Same question applies. Any particular recommendations, or can we agree to move forward? Thank you. We move forward. Agenda item 9. Right, this is the minutes of the Housing Review Board held on the 30th of January 2025. And we have recommendations to Cabinet found on page 21, which I'll just read out and then come to the councillor. Do you have them there?
Of the 2 recommendations, yes.
Thank you, because my thing isn't quite working. Thank you. I'll just read them out quickly. It's at minute 36, the Housing Finance Report. The Cabinet approved the draft revenue and capital estimates, and the financial modelling element presented is noted, subject to suitable key performance indicators being introduced for the HRB to be able to monitor major capital repair expenditure. And minute 37, electrical compliance audit. The Cabinet approved that the HRB receive a progress report on the 9 actions referred to in the SWAP Housing Electrical Safety Report at the July meeting of the Housing Review Board. Thank you. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question on that, minute 37. It said that Housing agreed to complete the 9 actions by the 1st of April 25. Officers have completed 1 and workers started on 4 others. I just wonder how they are doing. We only have 25 days left to the April the 1st. I wonder how they're doing on the 9 actions, please.
So Councillor Ledger, unfortunately, is not here this evening to be able to answer that. So if, again, Amanda, do you get a note of Councillor Barlow's comment there? So can you just say that again, Ian, and we'll make sure Dan gives you a written answer to that.
Okay, I just wonder if the officer in charge of housing is present. I wonder if she could help us. But anyway, basically, the housing agreed to complete 9 actions by the 1st. This is the SWAP electrical report. Housing agreed to complete 9 actions by the 1st of April 25. Officers have completed 1 and work has started on 4 other actions. I just wondered, have the HRB seen a list of the 9 actions, and have they all nearly been completed, as we only have 25 days left till April the 1st?
So we would next expect that to be reported on at the next HRB, but I'm happy to make an exception and ask Councillor Ledger to provide a written answer. Thank you very much. So those recommendations we need to vote on. Oh, sorry, Steve, Councillor Gazard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just declare another effects NRI? I'm a council tenant, East Devon. If it's helpful, on minute 37, electrical compliances, I had a letter this morning advising me, and I can't remember the name of the company, that we're going to come round to do a audit. So the audit, electrical audit, is starting ASAP.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Stephen. I'm sure you'll be at the next HRB as well. Thank you. Right, so we still need to go to a vote on that, please. Cabinet, so all those in favour of accepting the recommendation on agenda page 21, thank you very much. That's unanimous, I think. Thank you. Okay, very good. Is there another one? Oh, I was taking those both together, but shall we take as whether we can assume that's the first recommendation we voted on? Can we just vote on the second one, please, as well? All those in favour? Thank you very much. We now go to agenda item 10, the minutes of scrutiny held on the 30th of January 2025. Do we wish to make any particular recommendation, or can we agree to move forward without specific recommendations? No, good. We move forward. Thank you very much. The minutes of overview held on the 20th of February 2025. There's a recommendation on agenda page 23. And I'm just going to see if my Vice Chair can summon that at all. Page 23, the recommendation. Actually, can you read it out, Paul?
Of course.
Are you happy to do that? Thank you.
Yes, minute 21, revisions to street naming and numbering policy to approve the proposed revisions to the council's street naming and numbering policy. Minute 22, the wildlife improvement policy to adopt the wildlife improvement policy as an official EDDC policy. And finally, minute 23, coach tourism in East Devon. Excuse me, that EDDC fund 50% of the costs of signage required for East Devon towns to satisfy the criteria for the Confederation of Passenger Transport, CPT, coach-friendly accreditation, as identified through the formal CPT audit process, up to £1,500 per town, and an overall maximum for the district of £12,000, subject to individual towns and parish councils meeting the remaining 50% of the costs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Would anybody like to comment on any of those recommendations from overview from outside of Cabinet, from inside of Cabinet? Yes, Councillor Olive, please.
Just a question, if I may, please, for John from Finance. Is that in line with budgets?
I will take that away and double check. I've been assured that it is, yes.
Lovely, thank you very much. And I just before, oh yes, Councillor Hawkins, thank you.
Sorry, I've just had a quick look at the finance comment on that item, which I appreciate John may not have, was on the hoof. The note there is that it's going to be a supplementary new budget to come from the general fund balance. So I suspect it's not been included in our budget, but it's below materiality that we're not hunting every sofa to find the full money.
Very good. Okay, thank you. I'd just like to note, if I may, thanks of Cabinet to Councillor Hegarty, who's been pursuing this with officers for some time, and it's a really good outcome for our tourism sector here, and something perhaps many of us here who may or may not get coaches very often, I don't know, but we might be a little bit oblivious to. So thank you, Del, for that. We need to take a vote on those recommendations, which I'll take en bloc. All those in favour, please. Thank you very much. Yep, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, we now move on to business. Agenda item 12, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund plan for 2025 to 2026. And we've got a report from Tom Winters, our Economic Development Manager. Tom, please.
Thank you, Chair. So EDDC have been managing East Devon's share of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund since 2022, and we've been using that funding for things like our culture, leisure programmes, grants for businesses to grow, support for those looking to upskill and those looking to gain employment. So government announced further funding for the next financial year for SPF, albeit with a 40% cut nationally. And for areas with a combined county authority like us now in Devon and Torbay, those organisations are now responsible for that money being filtered down. So for EDDC, we've been allocated just over 465,000 for the next financial year by the CCA to continue delivering SPF projects we have for the last 3 years. So as a part of the process of identifying which projects to proceed with, given the cuts, as I mentioned, we've engaged members of our UK SPF management panel, and we then were able to submit a plan to the CCA on time on the 5th of February. So we are now seeking Cabinet endorsement of the programme plan for the next financial year, along with amendments to the terms of reference for the panel to ensure that their remit covers the next financial year. And I'll also add quickly, if I may, that we had an announcement yesterday that we're looking to receive a top up to the Rural England Prosperity Fund, which is a sort of rural top up to SPF. We don't know how much that's going to be yet, or whether there's a role for the districts in that. But we know that that's going to be raised with the CCA on their next meeting on the 19th of March. But I should add that the recommendations in the report and the updated terms of reference will enable the panel and the Director of Place to determine how top-up funding like that can be spent. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Tom. Anybody from outside of Cabinet like to? Yes, Councillor Goodman, please.
Thank you, Leader. I just, in the scrutiny, we had the pleasure of Tom come along and present this, and we were all very impressed. And I just want to put that on record, and we said that in our minutes. But I think it's a really good report. I think it demonstrates what excellent work your team have been doing. Yes, we've had funding from the government, but you've used it wisely. And I think that this just, what's good about this, it shows what you've achieved and what you're looking to achieve next year, and it's getting measured well. And I just wanted to congratulate the team for what they've done.
And anybody else from outside the Cabinet, or if not, come in with Councillor Hookway, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Tom for the report, and also to Tom and his team for their very hard work over the last couple of years in what's been delivered as a very successful project. It's had a big impact on cultural and tourism strategies, and I'm not going to say any more because the report is very written, but I'd just like to propose the recommendations, please.
Thank you, Councillor Hookway. Councillor Jackson, please.
Hello, thank you. Was largely content with this. My only suggestion is that we alter recommendation 1 to include in consultation with the with the economy and assets portfolio holder on that one. Be most appropriate. The rest of them I'm happy with.
Okay, noted. And Councillor Olive, please.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, please, through you, a question for Tom. I'm just looking at paragraph 1.6, which says that Devon County Council have awarded themselves not only £100,000 out of the UK SPF funds for monitoring and administration, but also 20% of the fund, £800,000, or about twice what they're proposing to give to us, I think, for the continuation of one of their programmes. Did they consult anyone about that before they did it, or was that a unilateral decision made by DCC without involvement of any of their partners in the regions?
I think this was a question through the chair, wasn't it, Councillor Olive? Yes. Mr. Winters, could you try and attempt an answer on that?
I'm not aware of any particular consultation to my knowledge. We certainly haven't been consulted on that. It was a project that was proposed by DCC, which is going to the CCA board, which obviously encompasses other organisations as well. But as I say, it's not something we've had any input in.
So I can help there a little, that at a shadow interim CCA board meeting, which was before any official meeting, it was a fait accompli in the on the agenda, so to speak, and it just happened, and it hasn't been something that's been possible to challenge democratically from our point of view, unfortunately. But it's a nice markup, isn't it? Some plumbers might be ashamed to mark up as high as that. Right, anybody else on this item? Yes, Councillor Hayward, please.
Thank you. I'm not sure, Councillor Jackson, with your substantive change to number 1, was that a seconding of Councillor Hookway's proposal?
Yeah, I mean, if he's happy to accept that, then yeah, I'll second it.
And can you just remind us what that was again, please, Sarah? In terms, it was about was around number 3.
Yes, so at the moment it says approves and adopts the 2025 to 26 UK SPF programme plan, including the indicative budgets and target output and outcomes as shown in Appendix 1, and grants delegated authority to the Director of Place to agree any necessary changes to the programme. I suggest that's Director of Place in consultation with the Economy and Assets Portfolio.
Okay. And Nick, you've accepted that as an amendment to go with your proposal?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, I'm happy to accept.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else on that?
Well, it's really in the mindful of the proposer and seconder, really, and Councillor Goodman touched on this earlier, that East Devon collectively should be very proud of what we have done with SPF and the other centralised funds since 2022. And I'd like to pay tribute to the cross-party panel that sits and considers the funds and considers the reports that Tom and his team have put together. The output and the outcomes to date have been extraordinary. And I think we have done our bit to make sure that centralised funds are well used in East Devon for the benefit of all, regardless of their political persuasion and across the district from Exmouth to Axmouth and up and down. So I think that needs to be recognised that it's been a success. It's disappointing that we have less to spend because we have proved time and time again that we're very good and do our due diligence and our governance to make sure that that money is well used, but we'll continue to do it with the lesser sum we have. And it's great news to hear about the rural fund as well. Thank you very much, Tom. I'm sure I'll be speaking to you about that in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. I agree with absolutely everything you said there. I think it's been brilliantly creatively used in non-discretionary parts of this council's operation that perhaps don't get as much attention as they ought. So well done, Tom and Charlie and people who've been involved in all of everything to do. Yes, everybody. But the long stuff. I'm looking at the older in the tooth, like Charlie, longer in the tooth. If he doesn't mind me saying that. Right, very good. So that was a yes. We need to have a proposer for that. We've got a seconder. So let's go, please, to a vote on that. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstaining? Thank you, Councillor Olive. No worries. Yes, but there's short of driving a tractor to Devon County, there's not much we can do. So, agenda item 13 now is the River Axe Local Nutrient Mitigation Fund, the governance thereof, and we now go to Charlie Plowden, our Assistant Director of Countryside and Leisure. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
No, I'm very sorry. I've completely forgotten that Councillor Young wishes to leap through the curtains first on this item, and he may cover another items as well. So your dice, Councillor Young.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce the next three items, in fact. So what has East Devon District Council done for the countryside and climate change? We've heard the expression build, 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 and elsewhere, drill, baby, drill. And unfortunately, we are required by government to build, but luckily our geology doesn't warrant drilling. Well, now we have countryside, countryside, countryside. Last week, we agreed exciting new plans for a recycling and waste contract. As recycling has become second nature, it has perhaps been forgotten why we recycle, to stop landfill and to reuse materials. Thanks to our residents and recycling teams, we are number one in the country for the least amount of residual waste, that's black bin, and fifth in the country for recycling at around 61%. Absolutely nothing goes to landfill. This evening we are proposing to Cabinet on three separate papers, all related to the countryside. River Axe SAC, local nutrient mitigation, then the tree, hedge, grow and woodland, and finally the biodiversity net gain banking. I'll leave it to all our wonderful officers to explain the nitty-gritty, but simply looking after our countryside and nature. However, that's not all. In April, we'll be discussing the Devon Local Nature Recovery Strategy, which we are also supporting, and later this year introducing our own policy on this important subject. We are finalising the Blackdown Hills National Landscape Policy for the next 5 years, also the East Devon Nature Landscape as well, both due out in June. On top of all this, there's the new habitat regulation draft policy for the ex-estuary and the Pebble Bed Heaths due, which we are just finalising. This is in close association with Timbridge and Exeter councils. Plus, we are expanding the Seaton Wetlands Nature Reserve following the purchase of more land from funds that had to be spent on habitat improvements. And work has started on our new Sangs area at Clis Meadows at Broadclist. So despite the amount of development we are required to provide by government targets, we are working even harder on protecting and enhancing our countryside and working towards net zero. So thank you, Team Countryside, and over to you.
Thank you. Yes, over to Charlie, please. Thank you, Jeff.
Let's keep the good news rolling then, Chair, shall we? We've received the 4 million from MHCLG recently, and their memorandum of understanding now seeks confirmation that we can deliver against the programme as stated against our bid to them that was delivered last year by Will here, our district ecologist. So we're thrilled to be able to receive that funding and now to be able to look about how we can put in place the programme. We've been working at some considerable pace since November to get everything in place, and this is a really important next step for us to be able to do that. So for Cabinet to really focus on the report, I just want to tease out the following areas, and I'll keep it brief. The proposed governance arrangements that we have within the report are seeking to ensure that we can be as agile as possible with both our reporting and also our decision making. And we've followed similar models that we have in operation across the council just to reassure ourselves that we can do that. Secondly, the Oversight Group will provide the strategic steering and monitoring of the delivery of the programme, and that it will ensure that it stays within the agreed areas of expenditure and that the impacts of the work programme are delivering improvements to the condition of the River Axe SAC, as outlined on page 69 of the report. Thirdly, the Oversight Group will provide recommendations on the development of the programme to Cabinet, or if there are any significant variations to the programme that require Cabinet approval, as outlined in section 4 of the report. To reassure Cabinet, the framework that we put before you for consideration has been pulled together with a considerable amount of advice from both Dorset and Somerset councils who have existing nutrient neutrality schemes in place. So drawing on their best practice and a really good steer we've had from them in those discussions that Will's had with fellow officers over the border. In terms of the membership to the Oversight and Project Steering Groups in Appendix 1, we have sought to ensure that we have the right representation of membership without it being too numerous and unable to be agile, with a focus of representatives from the relevant parish and town councils who are impacted by the programme activities. We may need just to go back and sort of tweak that. It's in Appendix 1. We've given an indication, but we just may need to revisit that to make sure we've got that right. So that's not set in stone. That's just a starter for 10. So we can revise that, with advice from members. Also, what is emerging is that there's a very fluid nature of advice that's been given to us, particularly from Natural England on the various interventions that we put together in the bid. So the Oversight Group and the Steering Group will be well placed to be able to react and respond to those amendments. So those are the key points, Chair. I have our resident expert, Will, our district ecologist, who can deal with the really sort of crunchy technical issues that Cabinet may want to raise. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Jeff, very much. Members from Councillor Barley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, more for information really. It says you've got to complete the end of grant evaluation in 25-26. Does that mean we only have a year to spend this money?
We don't have a year to spend the money, but we have to send a report within that time frame to demonstrate how that money has been spent. MHCLG want the commitment to spend by the end of this March, which is hence having the governance structure in place. And we need, sign off from Section 151 officer to provide that confidence that the money will be spent. But these schemes are estimated to take several years to implement. For example, this is the start of the process. So, for example, the next part of the process we're going through local government procurement. The Procurement Act has just changed. Local government is not a fast-moving process from my relatively limited experience in local government. So It's to give confidence to MHCLG that the money is being spent on what it says to be spent, which is for nutrient mitigation on the River Axe. There are parts within the MOU, or the Memorandum of Understanding, in terms of there are other schemes, environmental schemes going on at the moment, so protected site strategies, for example, and how government are looking at restoring or enhancing European designated sites, and if there are other measures, for example, work with Natural England and the Environment Agency, which can say create a scheme that contributes to the recovery of the habitat site condition, so the river condition to do with phosphorus, then the money is specifically required to go back into the restoration or the site enhancement within that. So that will not happen in 2 years.
Sorry, just how can you do a complete the end of grant evaluation then? So you're basically going to say, you know, by the end of next year what we're going to have spent it on, so we'll know where the money's going by then. Is that what we're saying?
I think we'll have an indication of what schemes it will be spent on. But for example, you know, if we want to create a wetland scheme, that could be several years down the line. So for example, when the expression of interest are put together, and even now it's based on a programme of measures, because for example, guidance is changing on what mitigation measures might be suitable. So we might go down the road of one mitigation measure, and the guidance change, and we have to go and choose another mitigation measure. So it's going to have to react with whatever the guidance is coming out, the best available information we have at the time. And I think in terms of the end of 2025, 26, we just have to provide MHCLG of what, you know, essentially to prove we're spending money on the mitigation measures.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Thank you. Will, any other questions from Councillor Gazard, please, and then Councillor Goodman?
Thank you, Chair, and I apologise from the start if I've misunderstood all this, but and I'm looking at Ed because you might be able to help me. Did we have not a ban, but we decided that we wouldn't do any further developments in the Axe Valley because of the nutrients situation, and that came from a recommendation, I think, from English Nature or something like that. Will that still be in place until this work is done, or are we now in a position of where that changes? Thank you.
Anybody want to answer that from officer side? Yeah, Ed, thank you. Ed Freeman.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, that's right. So effectively we had a letter from Natural England saying we could only grant development that's classed as nutrient neutral, in that it doesn't have a negative impact on the protected habitat. So that remains the case. That's not necessarily a complete moratorium on development, because some development can mitigate itself. So we have granted some applications where they've been able to provide mitigation themselves. But this money from government is delivering a strategic mitigation strategy that we're looking to deliver, that will then help to unlock that situation and enable development to come forward, because the mitigation will be delivering through this process. Does that help?
Thanks, Ed, very much. Councillor Goodman and then Councillor Bailey, please.
Thank you. Well, this is good news, no doubt about that. To get 4.3 million to really improve our environment is good news, as Jeff said earlier. It is a lot of money. And I take your point, you said that you want to keep the oversight group as small as possible, but it is going to be quite large. My only comment on the paper is that with the steering group, there's no councillor, no cabinet representation on that. And I wonder if the portfolio ought to be on there, overseeing it with the officers. This is not making any political point. I just wonder whether or not there ought to be some oversight from cabinet. Because by the time it gets to the steering group, most of the work's being done in terms of setting out the budget. Just trying to be helpful.
So, and funnily enough, that is very helpful, Councillor Goodman, because I'm afraid I was going to suggest that the leader should be on that steering group. There has been, well, it's great. It's always helpful to have somebody there. If Councillor Young wants to carry my handbag, he can also come along too. But it is important. It's such an important scheme, as Councillor Goodman says, with such huge consequences and with such a significant history, that we ought really to be in the middle of that, I think. But thank you for that. Councillor Brian Bailey, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll withdraw my question, but I would like to, because it's been answered partially, but I would like to ask a question on item 14. Thank you.
Yep, that's fine, Brian. Thank you very much. So Councillor Olive, please, and then Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. So as it happens, I was going to make a sort of similar point to Councillor Goodman there. Sorry, Charlie, you know it was coming. Both points kind of related. One, it's quite striking, I think, that all four of the recommendations delegate authority to officers for what is potentially some quite significant items of expenditure, particularly recommendation 3, but applying to some extent to all of those. And I wonder if there needs to be some delegated authority that needs to be in consultation with relevant portfolio holders on those points. The other point, and it is related, is that the paper proposes establishing the delivery team, the steering group and the oversight group, but I'm not clear from the paper how the delegated authority that we're being asked to agree this evening actually involves particularly the oversight group. There's no mention of that group in as a consultee in the delegated authority, as for example we saw in the previous item where recommendation 2 was delegating authority to the Director of Place in agreement with the UK SPF panel. I'm just not clear how that democratic accountability comes out in the proposals that's in front of us. I will leave it to others to figure out how to solve that problem.
Well, thank you, Councillor Royce. I suppose the question is really to officers is, I think there's a general sentiment, members and members of Cabinet, that we do need to look a little bit more at this governance side of things. I don't think we should do that right now, going through it line by line, because we're not going to get it right. But have we got time to do that somehow and bring it back, or is there an urgent rush on this? I mean, I know we want to implement it soon, in as much as presumably the work can be proceeded with, the discussions can be had with Somerset and Dorset and whatever, while we get perhaps our own ducks in a row.
I'll jump in first and Will can sort of follow up. So the principle here is obviously to make it as agile as possible, and so we sort of took that advice, and so it's not an attempt in any way to derail any transparency or due process. So it's just trying to get that balance right, because there's going to be a lot of work, a lot of quite technical issues coming through. Decisions need to be made and made quite quickly, and so it's just trying to get that right balance, Chair. So happy to take obviously comments and changes, etc., but always just bearing in mind that we do try and need to keep this agile in terms of decision making, and we have followed Dorset and Somerset Council's advice, you know, very closely. You know, who've been running through this, you know, a good year or two longer than we have. So on that.
Understood. Thanks, Charlie. What do you think? Councillor Olive, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make a brief observation following what Mr Plowden said, that we do have other programmes where urgent and substantial decisions like those implied by this programme are made. The Place and Prosperity Investment Fund comes to mind in particular, where it's not one portfolio holder that has to be consulted on those decisions, but I believe, and perhaps you'll correct me, Vice Chair, if I'm wrong, but it's 3 portfolio holders and the Chair of Overview, or at least 3 members, I think, when decisions are taken under that scheme of delegation.
I'd have to check the exact details, but you're quite right. It's not one portfolio holder. It's a composite of.
Yeah, and that's a similarly significant, if not more significant, investment programme.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jackson, please.
Yeah, I shared Todd's sentiment there. I think if you're going to form that panel, there's a reason that that membership has been selected to form that panel. And as it stands at the moment, I don't see that. But I take your point, Charlie. I understand you want to be fleet of foot. Completely get that. But at the moment, I don't see that balance that we need there. With respect to yourself, I'm not sure that oversight of just yourself is going to achieve that either.
Okay, we might have a little bit of help from our Deputy Monitoring Officer here, Assistant.
Thank you, Chair. Just suggesting that perhaps we add recommendation 5, that the leader agrees the extent of the democratic input with the Director of Place, which I think Director of Place is happy with, and if the lead is happy with, it just saves us doing it on the hoof now and risking getting it not quite right. So the leader can confer with whoever he needs to take that forward.
I'd welcome that. I wouldn't normally leap into the fray like this, as you all know. I'd leap out of the fray, but I think this is so crucial. Councillor Olive, please.
I think my concern with that, Chair, I can see how that would work in terms of agreeing who's the appropriate portfolio holder to consult on each of the individual recommendations, but I'm not sure that solves the problem that it's not at all obvious here how particularly the oversight group is actually involved in signing off any of these decisions. I think it solves the former problem and not the latter.
So we need to find a way, perhaps, for the Director of Place and I, working with Charlie, to bring more clarity forward on that, perhaps, as a next move. Shall we do that as part of recommendation 5 then?
I think it should be slightly broader than that. If I might suggest it could be the Director of Place, yourself, Chair, Councillor Young, and myself, as it's relevant to both of our portfolios and quite important to both of our portfolios there. Possibly also Councillor Jackson if we're talking governance arrangements. Not that I want to make it a hugely wieldy group, but I think there's work to do that.
Okay, can we cope with that, do we think? Yes. Okay, well, in which case, would you like to make that as a 5th recommendation proposal?
I'm quite happy. I think Councillor Young possibly proposed the recommendations earlier, but I'm quite happy to second with that addition, Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can make the recommendation for this with the additional recommendation.
Thank you very much. In which case, I think we're clear on what we're voting about. So all those in favour, please. And that's none against, so that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. We now go on to agenda item 14, already introduced by Jeff. Trees, Hedgerow and Woodland Strategy for East Devon 24-34. Charlie, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We've been through a very comprehensive process of consultation and workshops with all the key partners, councillors, parish councils, town councillors, and also all our relevant internal services have been fully engaged in the development of this document to reassure Cabinet and wider councillors. And as a consequence, we believe the strategy is both ambitious and also deliverable over the 10-year period. It's a strategy, I think it's important to note, that's not just about our trees and their relationship to development issues, but also about how we can protect and manage our hedgerows and woodland areas to help deliver on our nature and climate change emergency declarations that we have made recently, which is following on with some of the comments that Jeff made in his introduction. So we aim to create momentum in the next 3 years with a number of initiatives and projects that will be delivered by both our internal teams and much closer engagement with our communities and partners. The areas that we feel within those 3 years that we will need to focus on will be around reviewing and updating our trees and development supplementary planning document as part of the local plan review work. We have also improved and importantly strengthened all our tree policy areas in the current local plan review process. We're looking to evolve our current tree warden scheme into a tree champion scheme, which will be led by a countryside team, and this will help us to start a more meaningful engagement with local communities in areas such as tree planting schemes to help us achieve our 30% tree canopy cover target by 2034. We also want to identify suitable council-owned land, particularly with our housing and street scene colleagues, where we can create tree planting schemes again as part of our tree canopy cover target. We're looking to work with the Woodland Trust to set up an East Devon tree equity project where we'll be looking at our towns which have the lowest levels of tree canopy cover, and often this is linked to the social deprivation indices and increase their tree cover. Also improving our network of hedgerows and woodland areas as part of our district-wide nature recovery network plan, enabling natural regeneration in our woodlands, which is fundamental to this whole approach. And that will in turn help to support wildlife that depends on this very important ecosystem. We'll also be working with our planning enforcement colleagues to set up appropriate levels of training to help with better understanding of tree enforcement issues, and also hopefully lead to action when it comes to carrying out our enforcement duties. And finally, we will and have started to collaborate much more closely with Forestry England, the Woodland Trust, Clinton Devon Estates, Devon Wildlife Trust and the National Trust to help us meet our tree canopy cover target, as they collectively have the land and the resources to make a huge contribution to increasing East Devon's tree cover in the next 10 years. So it's something that we won't be doing on our own, but very much in collaboration and partnership. And it's a very exciting challenge for all of us ahead, Chair, and we internally are very committed to that challenge going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie, very much. Councillor Brian Bailey, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've raised this matter before, and I'm very pleased to hear what Charlie and his team have done. I think to get this done so quickly is most impressive. There are various trees in where I come from in Exmouth that are in the strategic planning area, and people have been looking at these trees for quite some time now, and it's been proven these trees are between 300 and 400 years old. So would it be all right in the near future if I was to contact you and your team could look at these trees and verify they are what they are and get some definite sensible protection for these trees? Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, that would be absolutely fine to contact us. Obviously, we have tree preservation orders which we can protect trees. There's certain guidance. We can't just protect all trees. Normally, there has to be a threat behind something, and so that's why we don't go out and generally just TPO all trees. But if you could contact us, then I'm more than happy to meet up on site and discuss it. That'd be brilliant, and it'd be really interesting to see where these trees are, to be perfectly honest with you as well.
Thank you very much indeed.
No problems at all.
That's very kind of you, Alistair. Thank you. Councillor Goodman, please.
Thank you. Well, I've got a few questions, Charlie, which would imagine. The first point is, in November last year, the government put together a new tree planting task force. You don't mention that in the report, but you did mention just now about working with the Forestry and Woodland Trust. I think that's all part of it, but I haven't read the whole detail of that, but there may be some of the things that need to be included in there. The Government Environment Act says by 2050 we want canopy coverage of 16.5%, but we're already at 21.7% and we're going for 30. How did you arrive at 30%? Because that is one heck of a challenge, not for all towns, but some towns in parishes have already got the 30%. But how did you arrive at the 30%? As you know, I've always pushed the number of trees, and I've lost that, but that is absolutely fine. We're going for the canopy cover, but what number of trees does the 30% mean? Which might be difficult. On page 3 of the report, you mention noise pollution, but nowhere can I see specifically the benefit for air pollution and protecting people's health. And I would think that's quite key, because we all know the benefit of having trees does, because it will soak in the carbon, etc. I think your challenge is one heck of a challenge, as you pointed out. I think that what's going to be really important these next 3 years is to monitor the progress. So therefore, Cabinet and Council can know how well you do. But you're absolutely right when you say you can't do it all yourself. You can. You need collaboration from the parishes, the town council, and the residents, and I think that's a real challenge. But overall, I'm pleased we've now got the strategy, and thank you.
Councillor Barlow, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to repeat praise for you because I think it's great. I believe that setting targets that are high are the best way to do that. I do think that, you know, and it's great that we're going to be working with towns and parishes more on this. Very upset to see that our placeholder meeting has been cancelled about the parish council activity engagement, which I don't know why, but I'll find that out. I just wanted to point out that Sidmouth, obviously I know Sidmouth's my area, so it's really easy, and I've been involved in this. 14,000 trees. We're nearly done our 14,000 trees, one for every member. And I agree with Councillor Goodwin. I think it's easier for people to understand. I know you understand that canopy covers, and of course canopy grows anyway. As long as we don't cut trees down, the canopy will naturally grow. And I just wonder, you know, out of that 14,000 trees, they haven't had to pay for a single one. National Highways gave us 1,500 trees this year, including the stakes and all the other things. And I just wonder if we shouldn't just set targets to parishes and say, we will get 150,000 trees over the next 5 years, and we will give them to every parish and set them the target, because it's very easy for them to find these things. I just hope that we don't have to micromanage it and let the councils, the parishes, do the work for us.
Thank you. On that one, I'll come back to Charlie in a minute on all of this. I don't know if Councillor Barlow was a councillor at the time, but the when we did the trees for the Queen's Silver Jubilee, which was led by former Chair Councillor Thomas, I have to say that was not an easy thing for the districts to deal with some of the parishes on that. It's be careful what you wish for on that, perhaps. Councillor Faithful, please.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to list protected trees, once they go for whatever reason, is there anything you can do to put trees back in its place, or is it once it's gone, it's gone?
There's a duty that we can enforce to replant. It's only one tree. So if we lose, say, a protected oak tree, we can only actually request one tree to go back in its place. So ideally, we want to try and prevent the removal in the first place of that tree. So we are quite limited in what we can do there. It is also down to our discretion. So sometimes, say, if it's a woodland order, we wouldn't necessarily say we want replacement planting because there's a woodland there. It may be appropriate to actually thin out those trees anyway. So sometimes in the short term, it may seem that we're losing a number of trees, but in the long time, we're hopefully going to get stronger, better development of trees. So that it's not quite such a finite, sort of thing like saying, let's just replace a tree because we've lost one. There may be a good reason why we're allowing that tree to be removed for long-term management over a larger area, for instance. So it's quite a tricky one.
Thank you, Alistair, very much. We'll so, Charlie,
Can I
by the
just
way,
come back? There is a
Peter,
specific tree.
sorry, Peter.
There is a specific
Peter,
tree in mind, but
can you just speak through the chair, please? And you please do. So, you want to ask another question?
Can I come back, Mr.
That's how it works. Yes, please.
I said there is a specific tree I had in mind, so I'll perhaps have a chat with you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Faithful. I misspoke a couple of minutes ago. I meant the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, not Silver Jubilee. Charlie, have you picked up any questions you'd like to answer from all of those? Thank you, please.
Thanks, Chair. If I work in reverse order, what's my memory still here? Pick up on Councillor Barlow's point about working with parishes. Absolutely. I think that's fundamental through the strategy. What we do know from an officer's perspective is that parishes know where those parcels of land are. We don't, but they do. And that's all part of what evolving our tree warden scheme into a tree champion scheme. So we can have, that's our ambition, to have someone in each parish that we can work with to identify where that land is. As officers, we can come in and help support that tree planting, whether it's providing the trees, giving advice on tree care, etc. So it's just saying to parishes, you know where the best places are. How can we help support you to plant the trees? There may not be a specific target of a number of trees within that parish, but we'll know more once we know where the land is, and it's all about the availability of land. So that's going to be a task in itself to be able to identify that, but that's something, you know, we have discussed internally through this process, so we're confident that we can do that. And there are a number of parishes and town councils who are way in advance of that, and obviously Sidmouth being one of those, which is giving a lead, and that can help us to inspire other towns and parishes about, you know, how this can be achieved. So we're confident that we can make good inroads on that. On the noise and the air pollution, Councillor Gilman, yes, I've picked up on that, and that's something I can come back to you on, if that's okay, outside of the meeting. With the 30% tree canopy cover, I will look at my colleagues, because we were on the client officers group, because we're at 22% at the moment. We're aware of what our partners are doing. So, for example, the National Trust have set a target of planting 1 million trees by 2030. So that's a big, bold statement that's already there. So knowing what our partners are doing and what we potentially can do on our own land, we felt that 30%, yes, it is a challenge, but you're right, we need to set ourselves that ambition, and that, you know, every strategy should have that ambition. And so we felt 30% was something that we could realistically achieve in 10 years. I'm looking at my colleagues here because we all signed up to it. And that if we get the right collaboration and the right partnership with those organisations that I mentioned, as well as our parish and town councils, we put ourselves in a really strong position to hit that target. And we've got to go with that positivity, that positive mindset that we can, and then hold ourselves to account. And we will be reviewing this strategy, you know, on a regular basis, so we can keep that one under review and check and modify, refine, etc. The strategies do, you know, they have to have that flex within them to understand, because we don't know what's going to happen in the next, you know, 2 or 3 years, let alone 10 years. So we can keep it under review, and we'll come back, you know, and be able to report on that.
Thanks, Charlie, very much. So coming inside Cabinet now. Oh no, Councillor Jenny Brown, sorry.
Thank you. So this is for Charlie and Ed. The TPOs, are they going to be updated? Because I've got a particular site in mind where the TPOs are 60 years old, and anything under that is not TPO. So there's been a whole load of trees cleared. I think Councillor Hayden probably knows what I mean, and just gone, and you could do nothing about it. So, and some of these trees, these could be 40 years up. Well, they were really quite big trees, and it's, you know, really, really worrying if they can just go and do this to our sort of established trees without thinning them out, just clearing the whole lot.
So TPO is slightly off, yeah, but can we do a brief answer for that, Alistair, please? Thank you.
So that'd be an area order then. So area orders basically protect trees that are growing at the time. So if a tree then starts growing the day after, it's not legally protected. And from my point of view, my team's point of view, they can be a pain, because it can be very difficult to say somebody can come along and just cut a tree down. The only way you can tell whether it's protected is counting the rings. We tend not to use them so much now because of the problem, but they do have their uses when we need to make emergency TPOs. But the government legislation states that we have to review our TPOs. And when I started working about 8 years ago, that's something that I started doing. We have about 1,500 TPOs, and they vary from individual trees to entire woodlands. And we've got group TPOs, which can have, again, maybe 1 or 2 trees or hundreds of trees. It's a really slow, time-consuming practice to do. So we're slowly going through them, but obviously we covered the entire of East Devon, and we're still doing our day-to-day work as well, so it's really difficult to get through that, but we are getting there, but it's going to be a long time. We're certain some councils don't review them at all, but we do actually go through and review them. But as I say, we've got to start somewhere. We are doing it, but it's going to be a long-term process. But again, if you want to contact me to let me know where that particular issue is, then we can look into a little bit more detail about what's going on there.
Thanks,
I
Alistair.
think there's sorry, through the chair, I think there's an enforcement notice gone out against it.
So coming inside, Councillor Jeffries, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was encouraged to hear about natural regeneration of forests and listening to some of the specifics about how much time spent on specific trees or specific areas. I was wondering if you could elaborate on how much of the strategy is going to be delivered by things that haven't got high input, perhaps like natural regeneration or improving existing woodlands.
Well, I think all our local nature reserves for natural regeneration, that is where the focus of that will be. For example, Knapcopse, Holliford Woods, for example, where that's Clearfeld, or James's team should say Clearfeld area of conifer woodland, and that's regenerating into really nice broadleaf woodland, and that is a kind of policy on the local nature reserves. Also with hedgerows as well, to let hedgerow kind of naturally manage to billow out, and I believe down in Seaton Wetlands, they've had success with kind of invertebrates they've recorded them due to the kind of scraggly hedges essentially, where they've left it to kind of naturally expand rather than kind of, you know, trimming them so they're like a nice square box essentially, or planting new hedges. So that is the kind of main area of influence. Ourselves as a council, we have influence, and we'll also promote that in terms of, for example, making recommendations for the next report on biodiversity net gain in terms of management plans. Would be recommending, for example, natural regeneration or expansion of, say, hedgerows to increase their habitat condition.
Thanks, Will, very much. So coming inside Cabinet now, I've got Councillor Rickson first, then Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. The emphasis at the moment has been on trees, but I would like to draw attention to hedgerows as well. There's a BBC article which does explain what a rich heritage we do have in Devon, and it says that we have 33,000 miles of hedgerows. This is more than any other county in England, and we still have 20% of species-rich hedgerows left in the UK, but I think even that is a sad indictment that it's only 20%. But the report mentions on page 3 about enhancing biodiversity, and it talks about urban trees and hedgerows are seen as critical habitats for wildlife. But I would like to know how, in terms of planning, we can protect hedgerows and retain them as far as possible when these large developments take place. Far too often, hedgerows are just ripped out. As an example, at Sid Ford, we had an ancient hedgerow which abounded Laundry Lane. It was all ripped out, replaced by an earth bank which has never really regenerated, and I have lost the sight of numerous butterflies that we used to get in the garden, quite species rich, get hardly anything now. And I'd also like to know whether there's anything that can be done to prevent householders from ripping out hedges and replacing them with these nasty woven fences which blow down in the wind, or to stop people from causing harm to hedgerows, because I think this is something very precious to us, and I think we should be looking after them.
Thanks, Marianne. I mean, Ed, it's a common problem, isn't it? Hedgerow removal in advance of any application, or sometimes afterwards. But have you got a few comments on that, please?
Yes, certainly, Chair. Yes, as Alistair has illustrated, that in terms of trees, we've got tree preservation orders where we can protect trees of value. The hedgerows side is more ancient hedgerows, which are protected, but hedgerows in urban areas don't benefit from that level of protection, so they are more vulnerable to being ripped out in terms of developments. We have sought to strengthen policies in the new local plan, and Will's been heavily involved in the drafting of those policies to strengthen our policy position when it comes to protecting trees and hedgerows on new development sites. Hopefully that will help to address the issues that are being raised. But we can only work within the legislation we have fundamentally, and individual householders have the right, unfortunately, to take out hedgerows and replace them with fences. I think one of the things we can hope to do through this strategy, and I think part of what the strategy looks to do, is educate people in terms of the ecological benefits of hedgerows, to hopefully educate them and discourage them from doing that, because obviously we want them to retain and help to maintain hedgerows in the district, and not look to replace them with fences. But as I say, unfortunately, our powers are fairly limited in that regard.
Thanks, Ed. That's very helpful. Thanks for the question, Marianne. Councillor Hawkins, please.
Thank you. I just focus on 2.2, highlighting that Cranbrook's got one of the lowest tree canopy cover areas, which is probably bit disappointing given that it's almost an area planned by the council. Pleased to note, however, the town council has taken some strides and have recently planted just shy of 3,500 trees this season. I had one initial query and then a follow-up, if I may. The first one was just do we have any data to know whether the land at Cranbrook, before Cranbrook, had that similar canopy level, or it was a particularly daft area for trees? And then a follow-up from that one, if I can.
Okay, I don't know, Will, if you've got the answer to that. Is that a written answer, or Alistair, is that something we need to reflect on?
Through you, Chair, I think we'd have to check to be sure. From recollection, most of the land at Cranbrook was farmland, I think. So other than along field boundaries, I wouldn't imagine there was a great deal of tree coverage.
Yeah, thank you. Got your lovely Clist Valley Park, of course, don't forget. So second question, Sam.
No, thank you. That's what I thought the case was, and it's just partly this is through my own ignorance. Is there something we need to address it, maybe in the Cranbrook plan development document, to ensure that the remaining canopy is protected or is improved through ongoing planning?
Ed, is that something that can be done?
Through you, Chair, I'm pretty sure there is some policy coverage of tree and hedgerow protection in the Cranbrook plan, but certainly the policies in the new local plan, many of which will also apply at Cranbrook to ensure that we've got parity across the district. So I'd have to check exactly what we've done, but I'm sure we have sought to do everything we can to protect tree and hedgerow coverage and promote further coverage at Cranbrook.
Thank you. Councillor Olive, please.
I thought I'd just supplement Ed's comment there to confirm that policy PB08, tree, hedges and woodland on development areas, in the draft regulation 19 local plan that's gone out for consultation, does in fact apply across the Cranbrook plan area, so it's on a parity with everywhere else.
I mean, he didn't even have to look that up. It's alarming. Okay, he did. Look, okay, so very good. In which case, Jeff, to wind up for us, please.
Yeah. This is a long-term plan, and unfortunately, I'm going to bring up that horrible word, unitary. It's coming along, but what I would hope that we can get this going, get people involved with it, and in the future, when unitaries are all formed, that this policy is transferred and used Devon-wide, and now the work that we do now will be in good stead for the future. So on that, I would like to make the recommendation of proposing the recommendation,
which is that we adopt the strategy in essence. Councillor Olive, to.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to second that. I'm delighted they've stolen my proposed wording for the vision as well.
Well, that's very good. You should have put a copyright on it, I suppose. Just before we go to the vote, I think with regard to unitary, you know, as confusing as the picture is as we move forward, I think you got an excellent point, Jeff. So whilst it's providing us with challenges, it's also providing us with opportunities that the best of the work that each of the councils does can be brought together as we move forward. And this is certainly, and it's been long in the gestation, hasn't it, this strategy as well. So it's looking good shape. So we've got a proposer and a seconder. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you to Alistair, Will and Charlie for that. We now go on to agenda item 15, which is the biodiversity net gain for habitat banks, relating to habitat banks monitoring and fees. And Will is going to present on that. Will Dommett, our district ecologist. Thanks, Will.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is a two-part report relating to biodiversity net gain, which has become mandatory since last February. Any development which can't deliver biodiversity net gain within its red line boundary or considered on-site can also offset the development impacts off-site. That could be within the blue line boundary, even if that is adjacent to the site, or it could be within a habitat bank. A habitat bank is an area of land which is managed specifically to increase its biodiversity value, and the increase in biodiversity value is then sold to developers to offset their development impacts on habitat impacts through development. So biodiversity net gain only applies to habitats, it doesn't relate to protected species compensation, for example. In terms of habitat banks, there are none in the district at the moment, so for a habitat bank to be established, it needs to be registered on the Natural England Habitat Register, off-site register, and to do that, a habitat bank proposer needs to have a legal agreement in place, so that is either a Section 106 agreement or conservation covenant with a responsible body. We're not a responsible body, so the only mechanism to do that within East Devon, or for us to enable habitat banks to be created within East Devon, is via a Section 106 agreement. This also applies to any land that is considered off-site as well. So there's two types of habitat banks. There's one where habitat is managed in advance of development, and another type is what's called habitats to order, essentially, where a development or developer will require a certain number of habitat units to offset their impacts, and they can approach a private landowner to do this. Now, to establish habitat banks and to consider whether we should enter into a legal agreement, because entering into a legal agreement provides certain obligations on us as a planning authority to monitor and enforce against those agreements should there be deviations, or if, say, such proposer says, you know, they're going to plant a lovely bit of woodland and grassland and then they plant a load of maize on it, for example. So there's a framework for assessing habitat bank proposals, which is based on kind of national frameworks across the country on looking at the kind of due diligence, such as have people undertaken a survey using an accredited ecologist? Do they own the land? Are the proposals what they are saying ecologically coherent? Are they going to create the amount of habitat units, which are measured using something called the biodiversity metric? So that's how you measure the change in biodiversity for biodiversity net gain. So there's a whole host of different criteria for developers or proposers to meet, or not developers, sorry. So a habitat bank proposer could be a landowner. It could be someone leasing the land from a landowner. The key thing is the land which is being created to deliver the biodiversity has to be secured for a minimum of 30 years. It has to be on the Natural England Register before they can sell units to developers. And we, as a planning authority, can't consent what's called a biodiversity game plan, which is a new process in planning. It's a post-planning process where developers can't start their development until they've discharged a biodiversity game plan. And if the biodiversity game plan relies on off-site habitat units, those units need to be registered on the Natural England Register. So it's in our interest to facilitate the delivery of habitat banks within the district, because if a developer can't deliver all their habitat or biodiversity net gain on site, they can go to off-site units, and that could be from anywhere in the country. So having habitat banks within East Devon will enable us to retain any impacts from development in East Devon within East Devon. There's a second part to the report as well, which is to do with monitoring fees. So another part of biodiversity net gain is the requirement for us as a planning authority to monitor the delivery of biodiversity net gain over the 30-year period. And then as entering into Section 106 agreements for off-site habitats and habitat banks as a discretionary service, we can charge a cost recovery for that. So there's two types of monitoring over the 30-year period, which includes developers sending in monitoring reports over the 30-year period, and there's also indirect monitoring, which we would do as a council. For example, an ecologist would, for example, myself would go out to make sure the habitats are being created as they say they are. And again, there's a fee proposal breakdown, which is based on kind of national kind of cost calculate frameworks, based on East Devon fees on officer pay scales, which includes on costs and corporate overheads. And that depends on the area of habitat being created and includes an inflation rate. There is a proposal to review those fees yearly. And that is, I guess, a high-level summary of the report. And happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Will, very much. Just one very quickly from me, just around this thing. One of the intentions here is to try and keep this mitigation in East Devon, isn't it? Presumably, so that we're not doing the old pine forests up in Scotland trick.
Exactly. Well, biodiversity net gain, it can only be in England. It can't be in Scotland. But yes, it's to retain. So one of the principles of biodiversity net gain is having the impact local, or the impacts being offset as locally as possible. So by enabling creation of habitat banks within East Devon, if there's development in East Devon, if those impacts are offset locally, in my view, that's better than being offset somewhere else in the country.
And then, you know, a cynical question, are some people going to open for business to make their land available for us just to offset to? Do you see what I mean? Is there a risk of that? I suppose we can't prevent it, I don't know. Well, will we end up with some landowners who perhaps can't get permission to build on that land, but that making their land available to be a site for these BNG things? Do you see what I mean? Is there a risk that, you know, some group of people say, yeah, come on, bring it to us, rather than spread it around?
I suppose there could be, but to sign up to, first, because it's discretionary whether we enter into a 106 agreement, there is a process in terms of there's a prioritisation framework in there as well. So we can essentially pick and choose which ones we enter into agreements with. So there's a proposed prioritisation based on, say, providing priority habitats, different types of habitat units. So there's different types of habitats within the metric, whether there's things such as public access, whether it's contributing towards kind of wider strategic nature recovery goals. So something like Jeff mentioned earlier, the local nature recovery strategy. There's something called Lawton Principles, which is generally called bigger, better, more joined up. So if we're assessing, say, a proposal, is it going to contribute to, say, increasing hedgerow connectivity, for example, which is important to us? Is it creating the habitats which are going to support our, say, although biodiversity net gain is not species linked, but it can contribute to species. So, for example, in the east part of the district, we've got beer quarry and caves, and there's consultation zones regarding specialist bats relating to that habitat site. So, for example, if there's two proposals, where one which is just like, it's, you know, a kind of punt, or one which is proposing a well thought out scheme which is proposing, say, foraging habitat for the bats associated with the caves, we can decide which one of those to proceed with. I think in terms of, I don't think there'll be lots and lots, because it's quite a complex and involved process to do this. There is interest within the council, and we've had people knocking at the door, at least a couple of people very keen to sign up for habitat banks, and this enables that process to be put in place essentially and to move that forward.
And then the irony is that, say there was some district or some rewilding projects located in the district, they couldn't really do this, could they? Because it's the opposite of rewilding, isn't it? It's kind of planting or shifting stuff to places rather than letting it. So it's a bit of an academic question, this.
Yeah, I guess in terms of, so biodiversity net gain has to be additional, so that it can't be a habitat bank. You can't be paid for doing something else, and it is offsetting development impacts. But the idea is, for example, for biodiversity net gain for developments would be almost a subjective in ecology terms, in terms of the impacts, and now there's a quantified way of measuring impact developments on habitats, and in a lot of cases, just due to the nature of building on land, that there can be loss of habitats, and so that provides a consistent method of saying, okay, you need to provide this much habitat to offset that impact. There is debate, and the trying to draft local plan looks at exceeding national minimum targets in terms of what that threshold for biodiversity net gain should be, and in terms of rewilding is a different beast compared to biodiversity net gain. Is tied to development, but the idea is, rather than, say, having a development site with a small patch of grass such as people playing football on, which is not saying that's not good for, say, placemaking or for green infrastructure, for example, but for biodiversity perspectives, it provides a mandate where you can accommodate both, really. It also, I guess, part of that, which isn't with habitat banks in terms of biodiversity net gain, is it disincentivises creation of development on higher value habitats, because that is also a mechanism of avoiding impacts, for example, on high-value habitats such as woodland or scrub.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Bill, very much. Councillor Barlow, please.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of things. First of all, obviously, the fees you're charging is for checking that they're doing what they're doing. If it comes to they're not doing what they're doing or what they're saying they're supposed to do, how do we enforce it and who pays for the enforcement? And quite often these developers set up and then cease to exist after a little while when they've done their development. They run off to the Channel Islands or wherever they go. So that's the first question. The second question is, back along when we were doing our SANGs, it was put forward, because they were very expensive at the time to build the SANGs, but we were putting forward that we were going to be hopefully using this or the SANGs as a possible area for biodiversity net gain as a bank. Are we intending to use our assets, whatever, and put them forward so that, because obviously they have to be maintained for 80 years. And again, we've got the Greater Countryside Park that we're putting forward. Are these things that we can actually get the developers to invest in our own projects? And are we putting them forward as a possible bank in the future?
In terms of council-owned habitat banks, they come outside the scope of this report, but it's something we are exploring. In terms of the county park, that has in terms of for creating, there's a couple of issues, but special requirements with that, because it's a SANG and change of use, it requires to deliver biodiversity net gain because it's a development project. It's also a high level of priority habitat, which also scores really highly in the biodiversity net gain metric. So it's what's called the kind of the headroom to increase biodiversity value on that site is limited. So there's a limited amount you can increase the biodiversity value on that site because it's a priority, designated as priority habitat, and you're also having to get biodiversity net gain for the change of use planning application on that. How there are other reasons to look for council-owned habitat banks, for example. So there's other projects such as the Coastal Defence Scheme, and East Devon District Council are a developer themselves, and having or managing or using council-owned land to offset those impacts might be more cost-effective than, say, going to a private market as well. So that is certainly something that is to be explored. This is, again, the first step in terms of getting private habitat banks on the market. Obviously, with the kind of new local plan coming forward, and there's the second new community. It's important to kind of, we're not going to be able to satisfy all that demand itself. Another thing to consider as well is one of the issues coming up with biodiversity net gain frequently, and there's a recent report from the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management regarding kind of small sites. I recently did a talk to a developer forum on small sites and biodiversity net gain, where they really struggled to get biodiversity net gain on site because of the constrained site area, essentially. However, those sites often have what's called a low baseline, so a low biodiversity value, so they're looking for fractions of units. So biodiversity net gain is measured in biodiversity units. When you're talking about a small site, it could be, 0.25, 0.1 of a unit. There becomes an issue because for habitat bank providers to sell 0.1 of a unit is actually more disproportionate cost for them than having to go through the legal process, having to register on the Natural England register. So,
Lovely, thanks, Will, very much. Okay, a very complete answer. Thank you for that, Councillor Bollis. We've got Councillor Bailey, Goodman, and then Jenny Brown. Councillor Brian Bailey, please.
Thank you, Chair. Like many good ideas, it appears to me that the theory is great. However, the practicality of this is going to be extremely difficult to operate, in my humble opinion. Obviously, logistical reasons, we are making a wildlife desert in this area to, for argument's sake, make a wildlife heaven in Wales. Is that what you're saying?
No, can I?
Where are we going to, if they're coming out of the area, where are they going to be?
So can I deal with that, because we need to crack on? No, actually, I asked the same question, Brian. So the aim is specifically to do this mitigation in East Devon, and the purpose of this report is to try and bolster the fact that it's in East Devon, so not Wales. So was there anything else you wanted to say as well?
I still think it should be a minefield of actually seeing how it will work and monitor it. But as I say, the theory is great, and I'm all for the idea if we can come up with some practical and usable way of operating it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brian. Councillor Goodman, please.
Thank you, Leader. Just a quick one. It's in recommendation 1.3, you talk about reviewing it at least annually. Then when we look at Appendix D, which is a really good report on what other councils are doing, this is a very complicated process. And I just wonder whether or not Cabinet would want within a year a proper review being done to see the true effect on how much this is costing, because we may be way off the mark in what we're charging either way. I just wonder if a more detailed review would be helpful in a year or 15 months' time when you've got the knowledge of what's actually happening. Just a thought.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Goodman. Councillor Jenny Brown, please.
Just quickly, so with regards to planning, we're going to get applications coming forward now that have been held back because of the River Axe issues. And apparently, because they've been held back and now released, they don't have to comply with the bangs and the sangs, I was told at the last planning meeting. So are we going to be looking into that?
It's a good point, Jenny. I'm not sure it's on this agenda item, is it? Unless, Ed, do you want to just pick that one up anyway, just as a courtesy answer?
Just quickly, I mean, there's no exemption for applications that have been held back. Those applications have been held up because they need to deliver mitigation. The previous report is how we're going to deliver that mitigation, so they will come forward once that mitigation is coming forward. There's no exemptions.
Thank you. Thanks for the question, Jenny, as well. So coming into Cabinet, Councillor Ritson first, please.
Finish chatting?
Yes, Councillor Olive.
My question regards the habitat banks again. How are you going to ensure that these are species rich? And how are you going to measure and monitor the effectiveness of these banks? For example, how many years do you think should be allowed to elapse before you can gauge whether they're successful or not?
Okay, and I'll hold on to that thought, Will. Anybody else from within Cabinet? Councillor Olive, please.
I have a couple of points, Chair, so it might be worth taking that question first and then coming back to me.
Okay, so just briefly, Will, on habitat sort of quantum and quality, I suppose.
Sure. So that within the report, there's defined monitoring periods, which includes monitoring from the developer or the habitat bank providers. There's also monitoring periods for us, the LPA, including site visits to those sites to ensure those habitats being created. In terms of measuring the species richness, in terms of habitat banks or biodiversity units, they're measured using the biodiversity metric and accompanying habitat condition assessment sheets, which measures things such as number of species per metre squared, for example, number of woody species. So there's quantified mechanism of doing that.
Thank you, Will, very much. Councillor Olive, please.
Thank you, Chair. I promise I'll be less of a pain on this one than I was the last one. So, first question through you, please, Chair, and largely for the benefit of the tape. I wonder if maybe officers could clarify why our proposed fees are so much higher than the Devon benchmark that's set out in the report. I think nearly twice in most cases. And then two sort of questions about potential amendments to various items in the appendix, actually, the actual practical process for these. One, looking at Appendix B, Table 2, the list of consultees for all applications for habitat banks. I just wonder if, given the significance of these at a district level, the portfolio holders for Coast Country Environment and Strategic Planning need to be on that list in addition to just the parish council and the local ward member. And then in Appendix C, Stage 3 Criteria 1, which talks about making sure that the habitat bank can be funded and maintained for its 30-year life. I'm just a little bit concerned that the criteria in there aren't quite robust enough in terms of making sure that the habitat bank stays in operation for those 30 years. And do we just need to beef up that criteria a little bit? I'm slightly concerned, for example, that setting up a separate code in accounts doesn't quite strike me as actually protecting money for 30 years. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. And Will, you haven't been arrested, so this isn't for the benefit of the tape, just to say that.
So in terms of the fees, the Devon County Council fees on their website is a starting point. The fees that I've derived based on officer salary bands, on East Devon District Council on costs and kind of corporate overhead costs. That's how that's been worked out. I spoke to the officer in Devon County Council, and their fees were based on the kind of internal service level agreement costs between them and other LPAs, rather than say the actual cost it's costing them. It has been gone to our finance for review as well. I'm waiting for final comeback on that as well. So there is a yes, that is being reviewed by our internal finance officers, and it's based on evidence that on kind of benchmarking of fees within the council. In terms of your second point, in terms of the kind of including portfolio holders, okay, yes, I'll take that point on. In terms of I guess the confidence in terms of where will the Habitat banks, are they going to be legit for 30 years? That's kind of going outside. I guess I'm an ecologist rather than a kind of lawyer. I'm doing the best I can at this. This is a kind of national framework that other Habitat banks are being kind of registered on, but also always welcome to take on board any comments or suggestions.
Thanks,
from our
Will.
colleagues.
Maybe, Councillor, if you could capture the point about portfolio holder involvement with an amended recommendation of some kind, if you want to think about that. I think Councillor Young, probably, to bring this home.
Yeah, BNG sounded really logical and simple, but actually it's proving a lot more challenging. And I think we need to get it going. We need to set up these banks and then monitor it and tweak it as we go. It's just one of those things that we need to see it grow and see it see how it all works out in the end. But it's something that we have to do, set BNG on all planning applications, and it's so logical that we should have land banks in our area. So I'd like to propose the recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Hookway.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. Acknowledging the fact that this is a very complex technical report with many implications, I believe that our residents will be very supportive of the concept of biodiversity net gain. There are lots of concerns raised, given to me, about loss of habitat, and for various reasons. And we are having a real battle with our local plan, trying to meet government requirements. I think the ability to be able to say we are actually trying to increase our biodiversity is going to be an important point. And therefore, I would like to second Councillor Young's recommendations, please.
Councillor Hawkins, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to put forward a slight amendment, if it's appropriate, just picking up on the finance comment being subject to a check of the costing calculations. And I did some quick maths, I probably got it horribly wrong, but I couldn't quite agree some of the sums. So just to potentially amend 1.2 to say, approves the principle and proposed method of calculating the fee structure for BNG. So it doesn't take away from it. We don't need to do the maths tonight. It just says we're happy with the underlying principles, but we can get the maths checked that I think the finance comment's alluding to, please.
Okay, would the proposer and second be happy with that small amendment to 1.2? I'll take that as a yes. Councillor Olive, you may wish to make a further amendment.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Also an amendment to 1.2 to add to the end of that sentence the words subject to the portfolio holders for coast, country and environment and strategic planning being included as consultees on all applications for habitat banks prior to phase 3 assessment.
Okay, thank you. Have our officers managed to yes, I think we understood what that was. I think everybody understood what that was. Again, the proposer second, are you happy to accept that amendment as well? Thank you very much. In which case, can we go to a vote, please? All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, Will. And thank you, Charlie. That was amazing. And Jeff as well. Amazing, sort of critically important for our nature, biodiversity, future, flooding, everything, series of items. So that's really excellent. Thank you very much. We now go to agenda item 16, the discretionary planning fees review. This is presented by Ed, our Assistant Director for Planning, Strategy and Development Management. Ed, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this report follows on from the corporate review of fees and charges that came through with the budget recently. Unfortunately, it wasn't possible to complete this part of the review in time for that report because we were not just looking at the charges themselves, but also looking at the level of service we were delivering. We also wanted to do benchmarking with neighbouring authorities and also wanted to engage through our planning agents forum with our customers to understand their needs and requirements through this process. It's important to understand that this relates only to the non-statutory planning fees. The majority of the fee income for the planning service comes through planning application fees, which are set nationally by the government. So we don't have control over those at the present time, although that may change in the future. The government's been talking about setting that on a local level. So what we've done is we've reviewed those fees and charges, looked at the service level. The main changes in terms of service level relate to pre-application charges, which relates to a large proportion of these charges, where we've sought to set sort of 3 levels of customer service that we'd offer, from a desktop assessment only to a sort of desktop plus, where people can have the desktop assessment and a Teams meeting or telephone call with an officer, or a full service where they have that desktop assessment but also a site visit and meeting with officers. And this sort of reflects feedback we've had from customers, where some people are sort of saying by only delivering one level of service, they're bound to pay the total charge and get that full service, when sometimes really all they want is a brief conversation with an officer or a quick steer as to whether or not something's going to be acceptable in principle or not. So it gives people that option and level of service with additional charges if that involves in heritage issues as well, because of the additional cost of our conservation officers' involvement. So we calculated the cost of all of that and how that would work out across the different grades of officers involved, and calculated charges on a cost recovery basis. And then you'll see in the appendices there's some benchmarking with other authorities, albeit I would highlight that their fees structures and the levels of service they provide are quite different, so doing meaningful comparisons is quite challenging. Perhaps the other aspect of this that's additional and controversial, I suppose, is the proposal to retain a 10% admin fee for applications that are invalid and are not progressed. We've noticed a number of neighbouring authorities have started to do that. There's a lot of work potentially involved in checking incoming applications, validating them, requesting additional information. Sometimes that information doesn't come through and we end up just returning the whole thing, including the fee, and we get nothing in return for all of that work that we've done. So the proposal is to retain a proportion of those fees at 10% where that is the case, to cover our admin charges. Through the consultation process, I think that's the issue that's caused a few comments. We've only had a couple of comments through the consultation we've done with agents, but that was the main issue, and their concern was ensuring that our validation requirements are reasonable. And I think that's not so much about the fee, but ensuring that we update our validation checklist, which is on our list of tasks to do, to ensure that we're very clear about what our requirements are and those are clearly understood. And we'll do further engagement through our agents forum as that work progresses as well. So the charges are set out within the appendices, and the proposal is we're asking members to recommend to council that the revised charges be adopted and that we review them from here on an annual basis as part of the wider corporate review. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Ed. That was extremely clear. Thank you. I saw a hand up. Councillor Barlow, please.
Thank you. Yes, I totally agree. I think the rates ought to go up. I always believe, though, I believe in charging well, but then you've got to give a good service, Ed. And I do think that if we are getting this extra money, I do hope that the the customer service that we're going to give these people so that they get someone that, and from a developer's point of view, get someone that they can speak to, that at the end of the day will follow it all the way through, and we can warrant the charges that we're going to put in. And I also think that your 10% isn't enough. I would charge 20% for any return if they haven't done it and they're not willing to fill in what you require, and you've made it very clear. I think it involves a lot of work at the beginning to check it and all the rest of it, and I think you should take more than 10%. I don't think 10% would be enough.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gazzard, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've only just received the paperwork today, so forgive me if I've haven't seen it in the paperwork. At present, if somebody brings a planning application forward and it's rejected, they get the opportunity to have a free go, second go. It's changed, is it? Oh, sorry, I wasn't aware of that.
Oh, but that's worth clarifying, actually, Steve, because I think not everybody does. Ed, what's the position on that these days, on the free second bite, so to speak?
Yes, the Council Gazzard's correct in that that always used to be the case, but that changed last year and was removed. So there's now the same fee has to be applied if they reapply for the development, because fundamentally the same amount of work is involved in dealing with a resubmission as the original application. So that is something that the government have recently changed and is obviously helping our budget position.
God bless the government then. Councillor Goodman, please.
Thank you. Just a couple of points, and I note that they haven't got, fees have not gone up since 2017, but there are some fees on page 137 where we're going to go up by up to 400%. Can we justify that? That's the first point. The second point is on the equalities and impact assessment. You've got low impact, yet actually on page 135, you actually are saying that the disabled ones, which is an equality issue, you're going to look after them, they're going to pay, there's going to be a discount for them. So what I would suggest should go in that line is you're actually offsetting, you're looking at those people as, because it is a problem, it's going to affect those people, but you're not saying that in the equalities statement, is what I'm trying to say. The other thing, and I looked at this and looked in, I think I know, but I'm not 100% sure, is on the invalid application, is invalid mean that they shouldn't have put it in the first place because it's not a thing that they're going to get permission for? Or does it mean they've made mistakes? And I wasn't quite sure, and I think once this goes in, if we could clarify that, Ed, because I was confused.
So I think just before we go to the quantum of the scale of the increase, I don't think that's for you to answer. That's for Cabinet to decide if we find that acceptable. You've put that forward, and that's for us to discuss. But the other questions, yes, please do.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, take the point about the equalities assessment. I mean, we've simply carried forward a principle from the government's charges of a reduced fee for those. But you're quite right. We perhaps should have noted that in the qualities assessment. In terms of invalid applications, it's not an assessment of the acceptability of the development that's being proposed. It's whether or not the information they've submitted is sufficient for us to consider that application. So we have a validation checklist which sets out what information is required for different types of applications. If they haven't submitted, for example, a design and access statement with a development that requires one, we will write back and say, you need to submit a design and access statement. That all involves work in terms of us checking that application, requesting that information, and if we never receive it, we'll just send the application back and say we can't deal with your application. So the proposal is we retain a small admin charge to cover our costs of doing that.
Thank you. I just wonder whether we're missing an opportunity here, because I think at the moment, Ed, we're talking about bringing this back for any fee adjustments as part of corporate plan work in a year's time. That makes sense, I suppose. I'm just wondering whether it's one of those things that, like car park charges, we should start regularising alongside RPI or something, but maybe that's too stiff, I don't know. Yes, Councillor Hawkins, please.
Thank you, Chair. We had similar thoughts, and I did think about proposing the recommendations put up with the end of the second part, just say with the principle of an annual inflationary increase. It captures, therefore, the spirit of that wish without formally mandating it.
Okay, so you don't have to change the wording then, is that what you're saying?
Sorry, no, that was with a suggested that we just add with the principle of an annual inflationary increase, just so at least that's documented that our wishes are to do even RPI, CPI.
Yes, it looks as if we could add that recommendation and it'll get picked up as part of the budget process in any case for another look. So Councillor Ritson, please.
Second what Sam has just said.
Councillor Olive has become defunct. Councillor Young.
Yeah, can we monitor the take-up of planning applications against other years, just to see how things are going? Because it might be putting some people off planning applications, but still doing the work. Likely retrospective applications might actually go up.
I imagine that monitoring would just take place as a matter of course, wouldn't it, Ed, actually? I mean, if we find a sort of 75% plunge in planning applications, then we'll read the room, won't we?
Well, through Chair, I mean, these charges aren't for applications themselves. This is inquiries and pre-application work. So this is non-statutory work. I can't see it putting people off, but we can produce data on the numbers of retrospective applications if members wish to see that.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Olive then, please.
Thank you, Chair. My thunder's been somewhat stolen, but I just thought it was interesting that the report suggests that neither finance and assets nor strategic planning are relevant portfolios. And as it's already been proposed and seconded, I won't say anything else. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. In which case, are we clear about the what we're voting on here? As amended, are we clear as well over to my right? No, in which case... Yes. Sam, could you, if you can remember your glorious wording of the amendment, do you want to read it slowly?
I may or may not have deleted that bit I had. I can come up with it again, sorry, bear with 2 seconds.
Would you like to email it to Amanda?
Yeah, it's just with the principle of an annual inflationary increase added to the end. I can email.
Yeah. Okay.
Tagged on the end of the sentence, where there should be a full stop.
And that's 1.2, isn't it? It's in recommendation 1.2. Good. I think we've got that. Oh, yeah. Okay, everybody. I think we're clear on what we're voting about there. So all those in favour, please. Thank you very much. That's carried, and thank you, Ed, very much for that. We now go to, and sorry for keeping you waiting, Joe, we go to Joe Avery for a council plan, delivery plan update, please.
Thank you very much, committee. Yes, so this is the update on the council plan actions. We are at the end of Q3, so this gives us 9 months of progress on the plan so far. We have some areas of variation, but the majority of the projects and the objectives are in progress and ongoing. Where we have projects that are listed as variations, we have consulted with responsible officers around what the issues are, and these appear to be mostly timescale issues. So we asked all of the responsible officers to give an indication, where possible, of perhaps new or appropriate timescales that reflect more achievable deadlines. And you'll see in the table that where those have been requested, that those are in red. So you can see all of those. Moving forward, the directors and their management teams are currently working through the council plan delivery plan and the directorate plans for 25-26 to review the priorities in light of the LGR, and they will be looking at timeframes and deliverables, making an assessment with that backdrop as to whether there should be anything that should be paused, accelerated, or to continue. That work will be brought back to Cabinet so that you can see the outcomes of that and any changes that they may be proposing for your agreement. But otherwise, if anyone has any questions, then happy to take those. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, very much indeed. Any questions from outside of Cabinet first, please? No. Inside of Cabinet? No. In which case, are we happy to vote just to note what has been reported to us by Joe? All those in favour, please? Thank you very much. That's carried. Joe, congratulations. I think that's the shortest Cabinet item ever. Well done. Thank you very much. So in celebration of that, shall we just have a break until 8:05 so that we can sort ourselves out? Thank you very much. Sorry, Tim.
Actually, just came together.
Yes. Oh, please could you take your seats and fasten your seatbelts, everybody? Well, that just shows my authority means nothing. Please could you take your seats and fasten your seatbelts? Thank you. Sorry, everybody, we're just sorting out a little Cranbrook matter over there. Won't take a sec. While we're waiting, Andy Wood. So just sorry, could you just share with everybody I know Ian raised this issue earlier about the placemaker thing that disappeared from the diaries, but could you just explain it for the benefit of all of us what that is? I seek not to embarrass Councillor Barlow, but I do think other members would wish to know.
So it won't embarrass Councillor Barlow because what I heard and what is subsequently being clarified. So I thought it related to the planned local government reorganisation devolution session for parish and town councils, which was originally set out as a placeholder, I think, for the evening of the 18th of this month. And then was replaced today by a formal Teams call invite. And I thought that would what was being referred to, but having clarified it with Councillor Barlow, that isn't the case. It was the learning session, I think, that was scheduled for Monday that has been cancelled, that he was referring to, Chair.
And do we know if anybody know if that's being uncancelled or replaced or anything
So
at some point?
I promised, Chair, to get some clarity on as to the reasons why.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Right, we're now back live streaming.
Sorry.
Oh, yes. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much, everybody. Welcome back. Oh, what's happened there? So we now go to agenda item 18, which is the Strata Business Plan 2025-2026. And we're getting a report here from somebody. I'm not quite sure who's doing that one. Anybody doing the Strata Business Plan? In which case, let's just have a little look. We may just be able to.
Come back to that one in a second, Chair.
Yes, I'll take an incredibly swift look at it. Okay, we'll come back to that one. We'll come back to that one in a minute. We'll come now to agenda item 19, the Clissonerton Neighbourhood Plan to be formally made. Ed Freeman, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members may recall commenting on the Clissonerton Neighbourhood Plan towards the end of last year. It's now been to referendum, and I'm pleased to say that 83.5% of the community that turned out to vote at the referendum voted in favour of the neighbourhood plan being made. So the recommendation is that members agree for the neighbourhood plan to be made. Note that it will form part of the development plan for the area and be a material consideration for planning decisions. And finally, that committee congratulates Clissonerton Parish Council and the Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group on the hard work that's gone into developing the plan. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Olive, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to propose the recommendations and particularly endorse congratulations to Clissonerton.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jackson, please.
Happy to second.
Anybody from outside Cabinet wish to speak on that? In which case we have a proposer and a seconder. All those in favour, please. Thank you very much. On agenda item 18. Thank you very much. So, and over to Anita, please, for agenda item 18, which is the Strata Business Plan 2025 to 26.
Thank you, Chair. So members, you have in front of you the Strata Business Plan. There's 2 appendices that go with it. If members have any queries, we will take those away and get answers back to you as soon as we can. Thank you.
Councillor Barlow, please.
I presume this is the one that you went to, I presume on the 28th of January, Chair. There was 3 people there. It lasted for 51 minutes. I was just going to ask, how much do we actually pay Strata every year? And my belief is it's an awful lot of money because it's a very important part of it. And I just wonder if it is in the 51 minutes properly looked at and decided. And do any officers go as well? Because I couldn't see any details of that.
Yes. So first of all, you have a Strata Scrutiny Committee, and then usually in the week or fortnight after that, you have the Strata Executive Committee, which meets. Excuse me. And that is made up of the leaders of the authorities, usually accompanied with their S151 chief finance officers as well. And then the presentations are made from the offices of Strata. I'm just looking for the precise amount that the contract, I mean, there's so much detail there. It's in there somewhere. Somebody want to?
It's 3.4 million, Chair. It's on page 15 of the Strata Business Plan as attached.
Thank you very much. Yet again, I feel like Batman and sort of Fat Man really, and Robin, I suppose, over there. Right. So, anybody else want to say anything about that, about the Strata business, or do we want to go with the recommendation, which is that the Strata Business Plan for 25-26 is recommended to be approved by full council? So it goes through us to full council. So Councillor Olive, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just thought I'd observe that in addition to the scrutiny, the Executive Committee meeting, I had the pleasure of driving to Newton Abbot for several hours to sit on the Scrutiny Committee with Councillors Levine and Westerman to examine the plan as well, and we were ultimately satisfied too. And therefore, I'm quite happy to propose a recommendation for you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Anybody seconded by Councillor Hayward? All those in favour, please. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anita. Excellent job. So I think I now throw to the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I move that under section 104,
We just need to do this. Sorry.
Yeah, well, Anita, can you lead us through that with the Cranbrook members then?
Sorry, oh, it's got very loud. Sorry, members, we just need to alter some interests and just confirm some interests so that we've got that on the public feed before we go into part B. So, Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you to use some previous use language for the purposes of the tape. Just an amendment to the declaration following further guidance on agenda item 24 to amend it from an ORI to affects NRI.
Thank you. Councillor Blakey.
Thank you. Similarly, I would like to change my previous declaration to now an affects NRI in respect of item 24.
And Councillor Bloxham.
Thank you. And again, change my previous to an affects NRI. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Cranbrook members, and thank you, Anita, and the members for sorting that out. Councillor Hayward, please.
Thank you. I'd like to move that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public, including the press, be excluded from the meeting as exempt information of the description set out on this agenda is likely to be disclosed, and on balance, the public interest is in discussing these items in private session, otherwise known as Part B. May I have a seconder for that proposal, please? Councillor Jackson, thank you. Can I ask all members to vote on that proposal? I think that's unanimous, Amanda, thank you. If you could take us into Part B and stop the live stream.